Okay.
So, Manu, random person off Twitter that I've just met. Do you want to tell me everything that I need to know about your context, and I'll see if I have any opinions about it?
Yeah, definitely. Well, first of all, I'm an engineer. I've been working in the tech industry for over 8 years, and I have worked with many traditional companies. And in the last 3 years, 4 years and a half, I've been working with blockchain companies and with open source technologies, and I've been helping different groups that are creating open source code. And yeah, so I have been exploring like different ways of how to create organizations that have a different structure than the usual. I've worked with different DAOs. I'm one of the co-founders of Marketing DAO for Ethereum. I work with also the Meta Cartel DAO, which is a nonprofit that helps other open source projects. And yeah, so currently I'm having an issue with the people that have been joining a new initiative that I launched a few days ago after I recovered from Corona, which is called 5Pandemics. And 5Pandemics was born with the idea of connecting people and creating kind of like a altruistic social media, meaning that the people that are helping can connect with the people that are needing help, or vice versa. And when I say people, I don't mean only individuals, I mean also organizations and any kind of initiative that actually wants to contribute for society. So why I decided to reach out to you is just because I think that you have a lot of experience in this aspect, and I think that your advice could be super, super valuable, because we're having a lot of volunteers that are joining and that want to do something, but then they don't get the structure that we have because we don't have a clear structure. This initiative was born only 2 weeks ago. And yeah, the thing that is happening is that they join, they're super enthusiastic about the idea, but then they drop out immediately, let's say after a day or so. So yeah, that's why I decided to reach out to you to see if you have any recommendation or if you had ideas on how we can, take the momentum that is going with all these people that want to help. And yeah, that's a little bit about me and about the idea.
Cool. Can you sketch in for me what kind of structure you've got so far? Like what communications tools you're using? Do you have any decision processes? Are there roles defined? Are you doing project management? Like what exists so far?
Well, as I told you a little bit before we talked, we have had an organization that has been kind of like bottoms up. I'm currently kind of like the dictator benevolent. So I've been like, guiding the whole organization with the vision and the product. I've been guiding it because I experienced what was having Corona, and I experienced different things that that made me realize that we have a series of problems, and all these people that want to help, they see the problem from their perspective, and which obviously is also valuable. But I think that I've had the experience in terms of suffering, having my parents on the front lines and not having any of the materials, to do a proper job as they are doctors, and also being sick in my home and not being able to connect with the different communities that are helping locally. So all of these problems that I realized, and on top of that, there's another problem that I found out when I got better. I decided to start helping new initiatives that were trying to help and fight Corona somehow. And I realized that most of them, after being in some of them, I realized that most of them don't have a way of getting people connected. The ones that need help with the ones that are providing help, and that's why the initiative was born. So the current stack that we're using is Slack. We're using Slack for communication. We're using Notion for managing the whole project, and we're using GitHub as our code is open source. And the way that we've been making decisions has been very organic, I have to say. So there are a lot of pieces of the puzzle everywhere, and everyone has been contributing with the piece that they have. And we're just putting it together. And the project and the vision has been also evolving with all the input from different people. And then we have been just changing like the whole concept and changing also the product itself. So it has been very open also, so anyone can propose anything. And if the idea is accepted by the large majority of people, then we pass it. We don't have a clear voting mechanism. We don't have any of that. It's just the people that have been really contributing are kind of like the ones that have a louder voice, because the other ones, they haven't contributed. And yeah, so that's basically how we've been handling it so far.
That's cool. That makes sense to me. I think I can kind of start to sketch a little bit of a picture of what's going on. Just, like I have some ideas and opinions and things, and we have to hold them with the disclaimer that I'm just one perspective. It's a perspective that's seen a lot of different decentralized groups, but still some of the things that I say might be perfectly tuned, and then other ones that be completely wrong. So like I don't expect to have it right, because one thing that I've learned from this is like it seems to me that the right organizational like structure and processes and agreements and stuff, I really think they're local, that they emerge out of the specific people or the context, the objectives, the values, the culture, everything. Like it's a really unique finished product that you're aiming for, like your organization is. So like standing very far away from this global perspective, it's hard to know which parts of my advice are going to apply and which ones are not. And that's just the complexity of the job. The first thing is just a mental model that's helpful for me is there's a study by Jacob Nielsen. I can't remember the name. It's about participation inequality or something like that. I can get you a link. And he introduces this idea of the different depth of participation that you can expect in an online community. And the frame that we use for it is 1-9-90. So like 1% of people are going to be super engaged. So it's you, maybe you've got a couple of other collaborators that are like people that are showing up every day, and really you feel like your peers and you're carrying this load together. And then there's 9, so that's the second ring outside of that, which is like the next 9% of people that you can expect to be responding to your invitations, and maybe not initiating so much, but like definitely contributing in an active way. And then the 90 are like people who are supportive in a more passive way. So they're like they'll read, or they'll pay attention, they'll show up occasionally, but a lot of the times, from your perspective right there in the middle, you won't see much of them. And that's just a normal distribution of an online community. And if you've got if you see you've got like 9 or 10% of people that are pretty active, then that's normal. That's not a problem. That's not like oh God, why am I failing to engage everyone? It's like, well, a big chunk of those people just showed up because it only took 2 clicks to join the community. It wasn't because they're like, oh, I need to organize my life around this priority now. Like people have got different priorities, and it doesn't reflect, it doesn't say you're doing something wrong if only 10% of people have engaged. That's I often encounter people with this a picture in mind where they think they're supposed to engage 100% of people, and like if we don't see them active, then there's something going wrong. Another useful frame related to that is what are they called? I forgot the name of them now, but there's this phrase we say, everything speaks. So that means like the people in that 90% outer circle, they are paying attention to some degree, and everything that you do will speak to them in a sense. So like, don't ignore them, don't pretend they're not there. Like, keep up the opportunities and the invitations, and the like, make it a very attractive place to get activated, and just to to be attentive to the fact that you've got this pool of people that are obviously somewhat interested, and they're the most likely ones that are going to get activated. So like, don't ignore them, but also don't expect that most of them are going to mobilize. So there's this kind of like balancing act. And at some stage further down the line, probably not yet, but maybe in the future, it might be helpful to start giving names to those thresholds. So like, I mean, you called yourself like the benevolent dictator, right? Like, if you're working with people that understand that kind of terminology and where that comes from, that can be super useful just to make that official, you know, like I'm the benevolent dictator for life. There's like people in the open source community that just get that. And there's people in other contexts that will be like, what are you talking about? I don't want a dictatorship, you know? But then beyond just the 1% core, then if you think about the 9%, like maybe it's helpful to have a way of defining, you know, like what kind of behavior do we expect to see from someone for them to then have a binding vote on important decisions, you know? So like, you might define that as an active contributor or a meaningful stakeholder. You choose your own language to define it, but it's like, once you've crossed this threshold, like you've come to this many meetings, you've shipped this much code, you know, you've participated, we've seen you participating, we've got some sense of who you are and your commitment to this project. That's how you qualify for a vote. I don't think you'll need that yet, but there might be a point in future where you need to say like, okay, there's this extra 90% of people that are around, but we don't expect them to be able to like block a decision or something until after they've actually been contributing in a meaningful way. Does that make sense before I move on to my other ideas?
Yeah, it completely makes sense. Completely makes sense, yeah.
And if you frame it in terms of like 1,990 and just to say like, this is normal, this is just what shows up, then it's not so much like a power grab of you being this elitist that's like, I must have my gang of cool kids. It's like, no, this is just normal. This is just what volunteer situations look like.
And you know, for the moment, it's like this. It's just because we want to achieve fast and we don't want to have the discussion around everything. So that's why I've been like guiding the product and guiding everything until now. But the idea is that we have a more decentralized decision-making process in the future. But I believe there has to be some kind of progressive decentralization instead of decentralization from day one. Because I think that it has to be progressive just because it has to be with the right people. So, and that's one of my experience with the different blockchain projects that I've been involved, is that once it's completely decentralized and everyone comes with their own intentions, then it becomes a shit show most of the time.
Yeah, that's the technical term.
And so that's why I believe that it should be progressive.
Yeah. So the next piece is related to this. It's partly about like, how do you bring new people in, and it's partly about how do you do work, and it's partly about how you make decisions. Is for me what provides a stable kind of scaffolding that's lightweight but reliable is to think in terms of rhythm. And so like in this kind of moment where we're working in a really intense chaos and crisis, I'd say that rhythm probably 1 week, or at the slowest maybe 2 weeks, where you're really doing the like basically agile or lean startup methodology, where you're focused on small iterative loops. So the question is like, if your loop is going to be 1 week long, it's like, start that week by saying, what are we going to deliver this week? What's something that's like an increment that is going to be valuable on its own, that's going to teach us something? Like, what are the experiments that we're going to test? What are the lessons we're seeking to learn this week? Get realistic about how much you can do in 1 week. And then at the end of that week, have a dedicated time where you stop and reflect and you go, okay, both like, what did we learn from our experiments, as in, you know, did people sign up on our website that we released? You know, so what's the outcome of the product that we delivered? But also not just what we're working on, but how we're working. That's probably an even more important question, especially for the first couple of loops, is like, you ask questions like, thinking back on the last week of working together, with post-it notes or whatever, take some notes of like, when were some moments in the last week where you really felt most engaged, most excited, most productive, most energized? And then the second question was like, when was it frustrating? When did you feel low, depressed, disengaged, left behind, pissed off, right? And then give people a chance to write all these things down privately, and then choose one or two of each category to share. And the game is basically, you want to highlight like, what are our strengths, because that gives you a good feeling of like, okay, we're growing our sense of capacity and our efficacy and our skills and our sense of connectedness and purpose and all that stuff. So let's notice that we're really good at doing these things. And then what's the one most urgent obstacle that we need to resolve? So what are we going to do differently in the next loop? So I got overwhelmed with all the Slack stuff. So maybe instead of doing Slack, we're going to have some, calls every morning instead of like happening it all day long through Slack, or, it could be whatever, but just like each loop, you want to be trying one very small adjustment to how you're organizing. And that way you'll, ideally you should be iterating towards the right, the structure that's right for you. And when you've got those loops, that really frees up your decision-making processes too, because it's like, you can focus on the kinds of decisions that you can just say, we're going to do this, and at the end of the week, we're going to review it. So like the decision is only lasts for 1 week. And then if it turns out at the end of the week, like someone comes along and says, I hate Slack, we've got to use Telegram, we've got to use Signal. Maybe that's not a great example, but it is the kind of thing where you can switch. Okay, we're going to try Telegram for a week and just see what we learn from that experience. And at the end of the week, you've got this dedicated period where you're stopping to reflect on how we're working. And if people say, Telegram was a nightmare, or yeah, it was great, actually, I felt so much better about it, whatever. It frees people up for decision-making where they're like willing to go along with it, because they know that at the end of the week, there's going to be this review period. And that review is based on our actual lived experience. Like, we did this thing, what did we learn from it? Rather than our predictions and projections about what the future might be, which is like, you're never going to agree on those, right? Like, everyone's always got a different view about what might happen in the future. And just having people talking for a long time about what they think might happen doesn't mean that you're getting anything close to collective intelligence. So this is the thing for me about collective intelligence, is focus on what you actually know, and increase what you actually know. And the way you do that is by looking backwards into the recent past, not by looking forwards into your guesses about what the future is going to hold.
Okay, interesting.
And that's counterintuitive for people. But if you've got the loops rolling, then people begin to understand it, because you can highlight, like, these are the things that are working really well. These are the lessons that we learned. These are the hypotheses that we tested, all that sort of stuff. And they start to see, this is how you can show up and be a meaningful contributor. As you come in with a good hypothesis, you do a piece of work, and then you say, look, this is what we learned from it.
Yeah. Nice.
Okay. The next one is about decision-making. People tend to come into these groups with an oversimplified mental model of decisions, which is basically, people think that decisions are either a dictatorship, like an autocracy, like someone telling you what to do, or they're a consensus where we're all going to stand around and think about it and come to an agreement. And actually, of course, there's many different options between those two ends of the spectrum. Mm-hmm. And in your context, what might work well if you're attracting people that are up for like quite an emergent, decentralized way of working, I'd recommend what they call the advice process. So that's probably what a lot of it is already happening, but just you don't have the name for it probably. And so just by naming it, it can really help to give people something to hold on to. So with the advice process, we say anyone can take any decision if they first seek the advice of people who are going to be affected or people that have expertise. Okay. So they have to get advice. They have to listen. So they're like, I'm going to take a decision about what we put on the website. It's up to me, like I'm the decision maker, but I'm going to check in with these people who are going to be affected by that decision, and I'm going to listen to them. Like, that's the hard bit. They've actually got to listen. They can't just come in with their pre-existing idea and like demolish and say, I talk to these people. Like, you actually have to listen and understand the perspective of the people that are advising you, and then you make the decision.
This is what is happening. This is exactly what is happening, but we didn't have a name for it.
Great. So this is the process now. It's like, yes, this is our structure. This is how it works.
Okay, but then I need to put it on paper.
Potentially, yeah. Potentially. It might help people, or you might not even need to have it on paper. You might even be able to, as new people come in, you can say, what we've noticed around here is this seems to be the way we're basically working, is if you want to lead on any piece of work, you can just get advice, listen properly, and then tell us what you decided. And if that's coupled to this looping process where you're actually stopping every week at the end of the week and having a reflection, you go, so what worked well this week? You'll start to see who is good at taking these advice decisions, and you'll start to see where someone made a decision that turned out not to be the right one, and you can make it normal and okay, like, oh yeah, that was the wrong decision, let's do it differently next time. And it doesn't have to be a big debate or a shameful experience of like, oh, I did the wrong thing. It's like, you really want to celebrate the momentum and say, it's great that we're doing stuff and we're learning stuff, and let's make the next one better.
Okay. Yeah, sounds good.
And then one more. You can tell I've had like 3 coffees this morning, eh? The one more is looking after people. Like, it's such an extraordinary time. People are going through all kinds of situations, so you've got your own personal health and what's happening with your family, and your anxiety about like disruption that are coming through society and your job and all this sort of, it's just like such a chaotic time. People need a lot of care and support and love and like space to be with their emotions, like there's so much demand, I think, right now for people to be able to process some of the emotional experience that they're going through, because it's intense. It's just intense. Like the number of people because I'm in Italy, so like I've been in lockdown now. We're coming up 5 weeks, and so like I can start to see, these my friends now in other countries, they're hitting 3.5 weeks, and that's the point where their relationship with their partner really starts to get intense. It's like these are the kind of things that are happening for pretty much everyone that's in lockdown. There's like these different points where you hit, it just gets explosive. And so you can design some structures into the organization that really help people to feel that they're being cared for, and that will both increase their capacity for doing good work, and it will look after them, because that's a good thing to do, and it will create much more resilience in the network of your relationships too, because like if people feel like they're getting their emotional needs met as well as they're working on something that's important, like they're just going to keep coming back and keep showing up. So you can establish different kinds of processes within the network that encourage more of a culture of care and support and solidarity and that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. And so that's like one example would be, we're experimenting at the moment with what we call the digital campfire. I got that language from Peter Lindbergh, who's a guy I interact with a lot on Twitter, a friend of mine. And the digital campfire, the format is like a Zoom call with somewhere between 20 and 100 people. You start with maybe 10, 15, 20 minutes of some kind of context, like maybe it's 2 people having some inspiring speaker, or you're having a small group discussion or something like that, something that sets people in the context. And then you put everyone into breakout groups of like 3 people maybe. And in that space of 3, you've got an opportunity to connect. And to connect, it's like you want to give people a question that opens them up to each other a little bit, so like, you put the question into that breakout group. Tell me a story about when you really felt like someone was caring for you. And just sharing that in that tiny little group of 3, that the degree of intimacy and connection that produces is just like instant good vibes and connection, And there's lots of questions like that you can ask. It can be like, tell me about the most joy that you felt this month, or like what was a really hard moment, or anything like that.
And what tool do you guys use for that?
We're just doing this on Zoom. On Zoom, you can put people into breakout groups.
Okay.
So and it's on all of I think it's even on all the free plans as well. Like you have to go into the advanced settings and switch on breakout groups. But if you do this thing where you start as a whole group and then you break them out into breakouts of 2 or 3 people, and then you come back as a whole group again and you hear something about like what happened in all those rooms, it really produces a lot of depth of connection and intimacy. And that will help as well with the learning process. Like if people feel like they trust each other and they're open with each other, they're going to learn much more effectively too.
Wow, these are really, really good, nice tips, man.
That's the extent of my coffee. I'm done.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much. Really,
it'd be really great to hear if any of that I just downloaded at you is like, are there any pieces that feel like precisely right on or really weird or like they're not going to fit you?
Probably like the one that I would say that won't fit us immediately is the small iterated loops. And it's just because we're pushing so hard for launching the MVP that you know, everyone is putting the piece of the puzzle that they have. And the thing is that there's no one that will say to anyone within the organization, you have to do this. So you know, everyone is just contributing as much as they can, whenever they can, however they can. So that's the only one. It's just because we still don't know who are those that are really, really putting all the effort into it, and who are those that are just there to see what's happening. So obviously you start to notice who are the ones that are putting a lot of work, because it's kind of obvious. There has to be some work done. And so you know that somebody did it, and you can track who did it. But there's still also other people that are doing stuff, and they're doing it quietly. And I noticed, because I'm checking the history of who's doing what, but the other ones don't notice that they're doing it. And obviously I'm sending a message every 2-3 days with an update of everything that has been done. And I try really, really hard to not forget any names. And so I go through all the history. So I try to encourage people, and I invite them to show up and to say it on the progress channel. Hey, I did this, and claim for what they did. But it's tough when not everyone has kind of like the same attitude towards the claiming their work. So I'm trying to establish this kind of culture right now. And you know, one thing that we will definitely do just after we launch the MVP, then it will fit. You know, having these small iterative loops. But for now, for the next 6-7 days that we need to really, really push forward, it's just, you know, kind of like really organic.
Yeah, that's cool. On the thing about the progress reports on Slack, something we do at Inspiral, we have a channel called Thanks. And you just like, the way that you find out about the Thanks channel is that someone tags you and goes, hey, I just want to thank Manu, who did this awesome thing, really made a difference to my day. Thanks, Manu, you're awesome. And you drop them in the channel there. And then they start to observe like, people are saying thanks to each other when they do cool stuff. And it's like, over time, you just have more and more of the community in that channel thanking each other all the time. And it's just a way to like celebrate and encourage each other. And that piece of celebration is essential. It's essential for community building.
I love this. This is a great idea.
And make sure that when you launch the MVP, you celebrate, you know, like have a Zoom party or something, get some champagne or something. Like celebration is absolutely essential to groups.
Awesome. Yeah. Sounds cool. I would definitely do that.
That's sweet. What else? Is there anything else that you're really puzzled about at the moment? I mean, I just gave you kind of months of work, so.
Thank you so much for that, Richard. Well, maybe I think that once we reach to a more mature level, we need to have some kind of clear structure. I don't know if that's the right way of doing it, or if we still have like this structure where anyone can come with their own idea and just claim something, but beforehand they need to communicate to the others. or if we should define some kind of a structure. You know, and why I'm saying this is just because I noticed that sometimes it's good to have some kind of nodes. It doesn't have to be one node. Maybe it's three, 4 people that are the node. I don't know. I really
Yeah.
don't know.
And probably again, like within a couple of weeks after the MVP, you might want to start forming, you know, into teams or working groups or committees or whatever, the circles, whatever language makes sense for you. But like, to start articulating these boundaries where you say, you know, so you might have a team who's, you might notice that you have a few people that are super interested in organizational structure, for instance, and you go, okay, you're the organizational improvement team, and you're going to be in charge of the organization improvements, like the structure of how we're working. And that doesn't mean you're going to make all the decisions about it, but it means that it's going to be your attention. You know, that's what you're paying attention to. And you're like, maybe sometimes you're going to have to host a conversation or a decision with the community. And then you have another one, which is about how do we outreach, you know, to get people onto the platform, and other people that are like doing the technical stuff. And that might naturally want to kind of settle out as you get more mature and as there's more people contributing, to sort of be able to say like, oh, you're more fitted to that team or that team, and to be able to define some boundaries and say like, when this situation comes up, go there. You know, like it doesn't go to, the thing is you'll get overloaded pretty soon with everyone asking everyone about everything. You know, this kind of like there's no information hierarchy, and so it just gets completely overwhelming. So like being able to create the right kind of silos without having them completely disconnected from each other. And again, the rhythm is the way that you keep them integrated. So like, yes, go off and work in your own separate teams, but make sure that there's a pulse where people are coming back together and getting synchronized again.
Yeah, sounds good.
But this is a couple of weeks away, so don't worry about it. Just focus on this week and next week, and then maybe get in touch with me again in a month or something like that.
Perfect.
We'll see how you're getting on then.
Thank you so much, man.
My pleasure. You're doing good stuff.
Thanks. And yeah, you taught me very, very good tips.
Great. Glad to help.